Why don't you have your seats, and we'll get started here talking about one of the key issues that's facing the industry, not only the regional airlines, but other members of our very important industry today. So before I have the pleasure of introducing our fantastic panelists today, I'd like to talk to you about the format, somewhat different than the panel we did this morning. We have presentations by each of our speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A session, but that shouldn't prevent you from standing up or raising your hand and asking a question as we go along. I know how sometimes there's an opportunity to add to the conversation. And that's really our goal here today, is really to have a very good dialogue about such an important issue to not only the folks on the panel here, who are key stakeholders in this conversation, but everybody that's attending the conference today. It's my pleasure to be the moderator. My name is Scott Foose. I'm the Senior Vice President, Operations and Safety at the Regional Airline Association. Prior to joining RAA, I was with Allegheny Airlines for a number of years. In my experience with RAA, I've been here about 12 years, one of the things I was involved in just a short few years ago was I had the opportunity to be the chairperson of the FAA's advisory committee that was put together to make recommendations on first officer qualification rules. That was quite a challenge for the industry, but I think although we're somewhat concerned about the content in the final rule that we expect to emerge from the FAA, hopefully before the FOQ, Public Law Self enacts on August 2nd, which will provide a little bit more sanity, if you will, to the public law that emerged from Congress 3 years ago. What I found very interesting, I really enjoyed chairing that committee because we had a lot of folks with very good experience around the table from all aspects of the industry that came up with some very, very good recommendations as well. Since then, back when I chaired that ARCs were not all that common, but since then the FAA has really used ARCs quite a bit to develop some recommendations. And what I noticed though is that after I finished that ARC, I found my name in the newspapers quite a bit, Wall Street Journal and Washington Post, talking about that key issue. I haven't noticed any of the other chairs being mentioned in those publications. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It was quite interesting. So going forward, of course, this is going to be a very important issue to all of us here. And what this panel brings today is really some very good information that we think will really improve the dialogue as well. I've received many calls over the past several months from probably folks within this room. I've calls from first officers at regional airlines asking about rulemaking, calls from suppliers asking about what RAA's perspective is on a pilot shortage, and probably more importantly, what RAA is doing about it as well. So that was really the emphasis for this panel. The industry has been very active at discussing this issue and looking at the impediments to pilot supply, and most importantly, looking at some of the solutions that will help keep a robust supply of qualified and safe and professional pilots available, not only to the regional airline industry, but major airlines as well. So with that, it's my pleasure really to introduce our panelists here. I'm going to make it very brief, and you can tell why. So to my left, actually I'm going to go in this order, Krista Poppy, who's the manager of the University Gateway Program at Cape Air. And to her left is Professor Kent Lovelace, University of North Dakota. And to his left is Captain Darren Greibel, who's the manager of Line operations, thank you, at ExpressJet Airlines. And all three of these people have been very active in this particular field as well. So let's go ahead and get started with these presentations. don't hold back on your questions, and then we will have some Q&A at the end of this as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Krista.
Thank you. Promise to keep this brief. But what I really want to talk to you about today is a program that we've developed with JetBlue Airways and a number of universities to help, hopefully, in the problem of pilot supply. And I know it's a hot topic right now, and a lot of discussions in a lot of different venues. But right now, what we want to focus on is providing a pathway for students to get to the final goal of a major airline pilot with JetBlue Airways. We started this partnership with JetBlue and University of North Dakota, as well as Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And we've grown recently this year to add Jacksonville University, Auburn University, and ExpressJet Airlines as another partner regional airline. Really the objective of this University Gateway program is to provide a pathway, a defined pathway for a student to reach a major airline with a number of steps that we think are going to provide for the necessary development of the necessary skills for success at JetBlue. Really, it's all about a known training and experience level and developing a common culture with a young adult who's going to become a JetBlue Airways pilot. There really hasn't been a program yet, and this when we started in 2008, that incorporated all of these necessary developments for a pilot to become a major airline pilot. And we really want to focus on a quality of education, as well as internship opportunities, structured flight training, and industry experience as a certified flight instructor, as well as a Part 135 airline pilot. And that's what our main goal and focus was, and all along providing mentorship and professional guidance along the way. The current model for becoming an airline pilot, there's a lot of questions out there. Is college important? Do I need to get a quality flight education? Is a 4-year degree important? How am I going to build my hours? There's a lot of question marks and a lot of students that I'm sure come to me and come to many of you saying, how do I get, this is my major airline goal, how do I get there? What's important for me? What kind of a regional experience do I need to obtain? How many hours is the important amount of hours? How long should I spend at each of these steps? And really, what's going to be important for me to be successful? At the end of this progression, right now, there's a lot of questions on what kind of valuable training does this pilot have? Do they share the same values and culture as their final airline objective? And what's the level of professionalism? Do we have the ability to assess that in an hour or 2-hour-long interview? This is the model that we've developed with JetBlue Airways that we think will develop those skills and abilities and will provide a student entering the aviation career field with the opportunity to succeed. We feel that ABI accreditation is important in setting a standard for education. Cape Air and JetBlue actually attend the universities. We go to the universities about 2 times a year to conduct interviews with students. And we typically accept students into this program in their sophomore or junior year. So they're pretty young still. But this is an opportunity for us to instill our values and culture and provide professional development along the way. Students complete an interview with Cape Air and JetBlue to be accepted. They have to maintain a 3.0 GPA and professor recommendations. At some point during their university, they're going to complete an internship. And this provides a level of perspective and industry experience, which I think builds a more well-rounded pilot. Internships are so important in students understanding what it takes to run an airline and how to be a successful pilot. We expect students to graduate maintaining a 3.0 GPA and start working as a flight instructor at the university. This allows the university to continue to grow and their own students and for instructors to give back to that. After flight instruction, they transition to Cape Air between 800 and 1,200 hours, and we get them their ATP qualifications, and they fly with us at Cape Air for 2 to 3 years as an ATP captain, building between 3,000 to 4,000 hours of flight time experience. We incorporated at the end of this a 3-day jet transition course, and this is to build on the fundamental skills they learned in the university setting and to really transition them from a piston twin airplane into an advanced aircraft, jet aircraft. And again, these are jet concepts that they learned at the undergraduate level that we're really building on in a 3-day jet transition course. Once they reach the required minimum 3,000 to 4,000 hours, which is competitive at JetBlue, they'd be eligible for a JetBlue final interview. I think the key to this program is continuing evaluation and mentorship throughout each step of the program. We recently announced ExpressJet as another partner, as another regional partner. So students would have the option, once completing a year as a captain at Cape Air, to proceed to ExpressJet and fly for ExpressJet for around 2 to 3 years before heading towards JetBlue. There are certainly many benefits to this. For students, it's a defined path with clearly obtainable goals. I know speaking with a lot of students, they feel relieved to know that after graduation they have a plan. They know how they're going to get to the end goal. They know how they're going to get to JetBlue. They know what they have to be successful in each and every step of this program to get there. We provide them with the skills that they're going to need to be successful, and they know that if they are successful in each and every step along the way, they'll be successful at JetBlue. For the university, a lot of partnerships have benefited from our Gateway program. Kent spent a semester with us learning about our company and certainly helping to better our organization. We also want to value the ABBY accreditation piece. We think it's a standard of flight training that we know we can get from our students. We know they're going to be successful. For us as a regional partner, it's a steady stream of qualified pilots. We know that we get an influx of young aviators with a lot of energy, a lot of motivation, that are interested in certainly making that next step, but also providing a great experience while they're at Cape Air, and a relationship that begins early on. We get to know these students as a sophomore or junior in college, 19, 20 years old. They complete an internship with us, and we really get to know who they are and what their values are and help them continue to grow in those values while they're at Cape Air. For JetBlue, it's kind of a no-brainer. They get highly qualified pilots that come from a great educational background that share the same values and culture that makes JetBlue so unique, and something that that's very important to them in the hiring process. It also provides a continuous evaluation of an individual for 7 to 8 years. It's really a 7 or 8 year interview process for a student, which is unique in this industry. Just a quick overview of what our program looks like. We launched in late 2007 and did our first recruiting events on campus in early 2008. We have 150 pilots currently in the program, 8 of which have been successful at achieving the JetBlue job. And most recently, this past fall, we've had 8 go through the training process at JetBlue and are now first officers online with JetBlue Airways. We have over 20 Gateway pilots currently flying for Cape Air that will be reaching that next step towards JetBlue in the next year or 2. And over 75 internships have been completed at both Cape Air and JetBlue. The real success of this program, and what I think is so important, is the development of each and every single one of these 150 students throughout the process. It's providing mentorship, and it's providing an opportunity for them to continue in their professional development through a JetBlue mentor. Each of them is assigned a JetBlue pilot mentor as a sophomore or junior in college. So they have an opportunity to really access those that are in the industry and get questions answered and get some really good information, some positive information. And JetBlue has an opportunity to influence those young aviators at an early stage. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? That's a great question. Currently, right now, we don't. We are exploring options for scholarships and other opportunities for students. I know that JetBlue is committed to looking into that so that we can be competitive. Certainly, as more of these programs are popping up and more of these pathway programs are becoming available. And we'd like to be able to do that in the future. But currently, we don't right now.
Are there any other questions? If you could step up to the mic so everybody could hear those, that'd be great. There you go.
What percentage of your pilot intake is coming from this program now?
Right now, it's still a small percentage. The program is about 5 to 6 years old, so we still are reaping the benefits of that. This year will probably be one of our biggest year, with about a quarter to 30% of our hiring coming from CFIs that are in this program. So it'll continue to grow, and hopefully we'll have about at least half of our input coming from this program. It allows us the opportunity to meter that flow back out the other end. So we know what's coming in one end and we know what's going out the other end. So it allows us to better plan for our own recruitment. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Kent, the podium's yours.
Morning. Kind of like church. Okay. Thanks for coming this morning. And I know if some of you are at the Ops Council meeting, you're going to see some similar presentations at what we talked about yesterday. But let me get the technology working. Here we go. Investigation of United States airline pilot labor supply is the theme of what we're talking about here today. And the research team extends beyond the University of North Dakota. This has sometimes lately been referred to as the UND study. UND led it, but there was a whole host of people looking at this pilot supply issue that provided us with information and coordinated activities that we couldn't have done on our own at the University of North Dakota. So you see the people listed there from all the institutions. I have to acknowledge, since in academia we do that, Bruce Chase from Laterno just was representing UAA and provided us with some extremely valuable information compared to our prior forecast studies about cost information of flight training. CC from Abby and the Abby team helped coordinate a survey along with UAA also that allowed us to reach out to 1,600 young potential aviators and try to ascertain their career aspirations that I'll discuss in just a little bit. We had numerous industry representatives that were a part of this research team that really drove the questions that we were to answer. And they came to us and said, could you do this? And the first request, really an initial request, came from the industry stakeholders group that Darren leads and has led. That's composed of many individuals and representatives throughout the airline industry, the education arena, the manufacturers arena, the associations. And the idea of the study was to provide data to the GAO if they were to embark on a study, which Darren will talk about here in just a little bit, and try to get more data on the effects of the first officer qualification rules. And also the study was being done based on recent hiring trends that many regional airlines are seeing some challenges with today as we go through things. The forecast that I'm going to give you is, and I'm just giving you snippets of it, but it's as any forecast, it's based on present market forces, and obviously as the dynamics change, the forecast will evolve over time as we continue to get more data, and we're attempting to do that. This forecast will be modified and updated. These are all the questions that Darren said, Kent, can you answer? Some of them we could and some of them we couldn't. But basically, and excuse me, this is a large laser size of a Buick. We have people interested in aviation. They make a consumer decision, a risk versus reward decision, and we tried to look at variables that would influence this. And we looked at several variables, but the only two that we could find any correlation or statistical significance with was major airline pilot hiring in terms of the creation of a new potential pilot. That's the reward, and the risk is the cost of flight training that they have to go through. Those two variables is what's dictating this forecast. Our prior forecast, we relied on commercial pilots and tried to predict the potential supply of commercial pilots. In light of the new FOQ rule, that's an obsolete concept. And so we looked and moved towards flight instructors for two reasons. The flight instructors has become kind of a de facto requirement in the light of the FOQ rule. People have to gain flight experience to become eligible. And secondly, there's been a fair amount of company-sponsored foreign pilot training. I'll show you the next slide just how much. But we're trying to avoid that influence in how many commercial pilots are eligible to the airline industry. So we looked at flight instructors as the source. Military pilots and the flow of those military pilots into the system are hard to predict. Obviously, at the University of North Dakota, we don't have a lot of direct contact and inroads at the Pentagon level. But through United Airlines and their attempts to ascertain some information, which they shared with us, we came up with a high number of 1,244 military pilots being available on an annual basis. And that was based on some historical numbers that United Airlines obtained. On average, 1,800 military pilots become eligible or are eligible to muster out annually. Roughly 85, as a high, 85% of those pilots has taken that opportunity. 80% of those have moved on to the airlines based on the Pentagon sources. The average is actually 50 to 60% over time actually take that opportunity to leave. But we used a conservative high number for the purpose of just that, being conservative. And then we get the potential supply for new airline pilots. This graph slide shows the influence of foreign pilot training within the United States. And where we got this information was Van Kern in the certification area of the FAA, and very, very important information. We've been trying to find out exactly how many commercial pilot certificates are being issued to non-US citizens on an annual basis. They're included in the FAA database, but they're not identified. And the only way we could do it, at least at this point in time, was to find out how many of them are taking commercial written exams. And as you can see, for the last 4 or 5 years, roughly 40 to 45% of the commercial pilot written exams taken in this country are taken by non-US citizens that we assume would not be available to the pilot supply, to the industry as a supply source. Now there's some positive side to this in that even though foreign pilots are coming here for training and they're not available to the industry, they're providing a source of activity and experience for flight instructors to build their time and move towards that, potential 1,500 hour mark to be hired for an airline. We found in the survey that I mentioned earlier that was conducted through ABI and UAA, and it had large numbers. As I said, there were 1,636 recipients when we closed it. And what we found out was that 53.67% of those people that responded to the survey want to pursue an airline career. And that's where we need to be careful about looking at pilot supply issues, looking at the FAA database, how many pilots are out there. It's not so many how many pilots are out there, but how many want to pursue the career. And we based the CFI production on the potential restricted ATP minimums in the model that we use. So we used the 1,000-hour mark in terms of a person becoming certificated. They make a decision, and then up to 4 years later, they get a CFI, and then up to 2 years later after that, they're at the restricted ATP minimums. And the key to this pilot supply issue as we see it is that number, that 53%. Potentially the model shows that if you convince 100% of those CFIs to pursue an airline career, you don't have a supply problem for the long term. So that's kind of the key. This just shows the outcome of the forecast. And what we did was we took retirements from the majors. We got that from A4A. We took growth projections from the airline monitors forecasts. We went back into the FAA database and looked at nominal or other attrition outside of retirement determined that to be on average at 1.52%. Threw all that demand into place, and then with the production model and the pilot supply based on airline pilot hiring versus the cost, we came up with an annual supply of CFIs, 53.67% of those wanting to become an airline pilot. So you can see over the long term, there's a potential shortage. Short term, it's not too bad, although I know regional airlines are having challenges right now. And so the summary of the forecast is a potential shortage of 35,000 pilots based on existing market conditions today. It considers pilots leaving and joining the industry on a yearly basis. It holds all other non-airline commercial ATP pilots as constant because it's very difficult to predict those outcomes, and we assume that would be a zero sum if anybody came from that arena into the airline industry. It doesn't consider the impacts of flight time, duty time. We have some information from some regionals that have shared that with us. But we don't have a lot of data, and obviously there's a lot of planning that's still going on. As we gain more information from that, we can throw that into the forecast. We don't have hard data on foreign airline pilot hiring, where foreign airlines come to hire to the United States to hire. As a part of the survey that we did, 58% of the students surveyed said they'd be willing to move to a foreign country to fly for a foreign airline to circumnavigate the FOQ rule. So there's a willingness out there to do it. Whether they will or not is a separate issue. And then finally, we didn't put in the potential impact of the FOQ rule on perceptions of people abandoning the airline career. We have some data to that effect, and again, that goes back to that survey that was done through UAA and ABI. 1,600 participants, 40 different education and training institutions or entities were represented by the respondents. And what we found out was that 32% plus are possibly, we asked the question, what's the impact of this rule on your perceptions for an airline career? And you can see 32% are possibly rethinking or second guessing about an airline career. A little over 8% have already changed their minds due to the rule or are going to pursue a professional pilot career, but not as an airline pilot. What we didn't ask in that survey that we should have was basically two questions and trying to put some quantitative data to the reasons as to why they chose not to pursue an airline career. And then what would it take to convince you to be an airline pilot or want to pursue that. So we did a quick follow-on study that was just completed last week. And we did it at a bad time, admittedly. It's the week before its finals week up home right now. We want to extend this through ABI and UAA and rethink this and get it out to a greater audience, perhaps in the fall. But here's what we found out. First of all, 57% of the survey we did at UND to get some data on those two questions, 57% are interested in pursuing an airline career. We asked the questions out of the 205 respondents, basically, why don't you want to be an airline pilot? And here are the results. And they could select multiple choices here. So the lifestyle schedule issue is an important issue to them, and they don't want to pursue it for that reason. Salary is another large issue. Prestige, less so. Industry stability, a little bit more than the prestige issue. They also indicated they've been exposed to other alternatives. And where we got these choices from were from qualitative remarks from prior surveys that we've done last year throughout multiple institutions. The other category were simply areas that people just had a different career interest in. So they said, I want to fly corporate, I want to fly for the military, I want to be a UAS operator, those kinds of things. And then we asked the final question, what would it take to convince you to consider an airline career? And we left this as an open-ended question because if we put selections in there, we'd introduce some bias. So we had some major themes. There was probably about 8 or 9 areas or themes of what they said, what would it take, and 35%, you're not supposed to put quantitative numbers on qualitative data, but just to put it in the scheme of things, a little over a third of the respondents said the reason that what would convince them would be a salary, increase in salary. 20%, a little over 20% indicated family, lifestyle, location issues. Work schedule issues was about 13%. And then a little over 8%, similar to the other survey, said that change the FOQ and get me to that airline sooner was an important part in their decision-making process. To give you some mitigation strategies, and again, it goes back to based on the model, the risk and reward side of it, convincing more CFIs to pursue an airline career. So the airlines need to get out there, actively recruit and persuade new pilots to consider the career, and you can do that by getting people to the places where people are making decisions, whether it be in high school, colleges, and so forth, and perhaps teaming with entities like that in the recruitment process. We need some focus group surveys to determine the particulars based on that last survey of specifically what salary would it take, and specifically what are the lifestyle issues that you're being confronted with that could possibly change, that would change your mind. And again, we may need to work through UAA and ABBY in that process to get a broader group. I think it's important to offer the defined career paths that Krista just talked about. There's a lot of success that's going on there. Students, young people want a defined path. For as footloose and fancy-free as they seem to be, they want a defined path. Cape Air has led that initiative, and they're to be congratulated, and it is successful. There's 8 people, as Krista said, that are moved on to JetBlue, so it's proven. ExpressJet and Delta created a similar program, Pathway, and then American Eagle has started the pipeline, what they call the pipeline program, that's offered some financial incentives with it. But I think these are very, very important. The other thing you can do is participate in a faculty development program. And Krista mentioned that. I took a sabbatical this semester, and I spent 40 days with Cape Air, and really a wonderful experience. I come from a general aviation background. It gave me a better appreciation of the challenges and the mission and what's involved in the airline industry. It's made me a spokesman for the airline industry. I can't understand why people wouldn't want to do it. And so I'm going to tell young people just that. And I have to say, Cape Air is a fabulous organization, very, very transparent with me, included me in many things. I saw all aspects of the company and the way it works. There's a lot of really positive, unsiloed communication at that company that they need to be proud of. And Linda and her team are here. Thank you so much for the opportunity you extended to me. I actually sent an email to my wife saying I was ready to join the Cape Air team while I was there. I just got back exactly. But I can't speak highly enough of that. And the point is that students come to people like myself in their decision process. And if I have a better understanding of what that industry is like, I can communicate better to the student and give them better information for them to make that decision. And in many ways, a more positive decision. So I encourage you to participate through that. ABBY is leading that charge through the faculty development program. The other thing we have to take a look at is the other variable, reducing the cost and debt of obtaining pilot certificates and ratings, and that might mean help with loan consolidation, supplemental financial aid payment, and obviously based on the survey, looking at salaries to convince people to join the airline ranks. One thing I do want to mention, and there's a student in here, Olga. Olga, raise your hand. I watched Olga at Cape Air. She's a part of a project similar to Gateway with SIU and Cape Air. And I watched her operate an aircraft. She flies very well. And if you want to get a direct contact with the impact of a program like this, please see Olga from the Fine Institution of SIU. So I just wanted to say that and mention that. Last thing is, all parties really need to promote the concept and the image, the positive image of the airline career, whether it be those people in education, certainly the airlines and the airline management themselves, labor, and I will say here, ALPA's done a wonderful job with their ACE program at some of the colleges, Aviation Career Education Program. They bring airline pilots to the students on a regular basis. They may propose or give them a scenario that they have to deal with, and then they talk about the aspect of professionalism and dealing with that scenario. But they're making an attempt to reach out to young people to promote the idea and the positive image of an airline career. The last thing I need to mention is, I had this discussion, and I again have to acknowledge my source, with Bob Shore, who's a chief pilot with Cape Air. We were talking about this pilot supply issue, and Bob said there's a lot of elements involved, just as I've listed here, people and entities that need to promote the concept and the positive image of an airline career. But he said the existing pilots have to have a part in it too. And he said we have to look the proper way as an airline pilot, we have to fly the proper way as an airline pilot, and we have to engage others in the proper way as an airline pilot. So I'm going to take that verbiage back to my students as a part of the process to build the airline career, at least with their career aspirations. So thank you so much. I appreciate you coming out and having a listen with us. So thank you. You want to move right to Darren?
Yeah, I think so. Hey, thank you, Ken. Darren, podium's yours.
Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm glad everyone's out to talk about pilot supply and demand once again. Thank you, Scott, for putting this panel together. I think this is an excellent opportunity once again to talk about this all-important issue and give us a chance to share ideas and thoughts and dive into this just a little bit. I've been working with Scott here for a couple of years now on this issue here, and it's proven to be a pretty interesting time in aviation. I want to start out with the industry as itself. I think we all see that the industry is starting to hit an interesting time with everything going on. We have a lot of regulatory change that's starting to happen to us with flight time and duty time, pilot retirements. We're going to see that come up pretty soon because of the age 65. Last December, that finally ran out. Our get out of jail free card ran out, and we're starting to see an increase in retirements. Growth, industry growth, we're seeing quite a bit of that start to uptick a little bit. Not only domestic, but we're also going to start seeing the growth in the Asian markets, European markets, and so forth. And then the last point, once again, is retirements. I think it's been put out there quite a bit, especially by A4A, how retirements, we're going to start seeing quite a bit of that happen in the major airlines, with the backfill coming from two spots, either the military or the regionals. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things going on with the regional airlines right now, and with the major airlines, and a lot of regulatory changes and so forth. All of this is driving a pilot supply and demand issue. For a while now, we've been looking at pilot supply and demand, and it's interesting that they're trying to figure out, is there a problem or is there not a problem? So many times in the past, you've heard pilot shortage, and we've all heard it for many, many years. We'd like to think this time might be just a little different, though. If you look back in history to say, hey, you know, these guys used to cry supply and demand, and they used to cry pilot shortage quite a bit, but it always worked out, didn't it? I mean, how many times have we heard that over the past 30, 40, 50, even if you go farther than that in history? But we say this time it might be a little different because in the past, there was always some type of conflict or something that produced pilots for the industry. When I say conflict, you can look at World War II, you can look at Korea, Vietnam Wars, and so forth. When those conflicts occurred, pilots were brought into the military, trained, they served their duty, and they came out and then continued their careers with the airlines, corporate, and so forth. If you look at today's history a little bit, we really haven't had a conflict to produce pilots. We've had a conflict out there, yes, but due to technology and advancements and so forth, you really didn't see a lot of influx of pilots into the military to fill that need. With the invention of unmanned aerial vehicles and so forth and being more and more prominent, we're also seeing the need for pilots that we know it as to be used in the military. So there's another issue right there that nowadays we don't see as many military pilots coming out anymore. That's a little different now. The other difference that we see is in retirements as a whole. In the past, has there been retirements? Absolutely. But have we seen it to be this dramatic in the past? Probably not. If you look over the next 20 years, look at the retirement forecasts and so forth, it's pretty astounding how huge it is. And I don't believe we've seen that. In the past also, you know, we got some of the new regulatory changes out there. What we try to call these is the perfect storm. We've got a lot of things coming at us at one time where we really have never seen this in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how we respond to it in the future and even starting today. It wasn't about a year ago, myself and a few other gentlemen from Delta Airlines, ExpressJet, John Allen himself from the FAA, we actually went to Congress and we talked to them a little bit about it, and we wanted to lay out a little bit to say, hey, listen, you know, we see this little train wreck happening out there in the future, and we really kind of want to get our head around it. One of the things that we came out of that meeting was the fact that, hey, you know what? If you guys think that this is a problem, we see this ourselves, but this will be really helpful if you could speak in numbers. We came back to the ExpressJet headquarters. We started putting together what we call a consortium or a stakeholder group. And we put together a group. It's about 18 folks that Kent mentioned a while ago. It's got all kinds of individuals and groups in there from A4A, REAA, ABI, UAA, NACA, all the good alphabets are all out there. We all came together as a group and we thought, you know what, I think we need to draft a position paper of where we are as a group. We are one big group here. We had Boeing was in there, Delta, United. I know I'm missing some, but trust me, there was a bunch. We all came to draw this position paper up to present to the Aviation House Subcommittee, to the GAO, to the Senate, and so forth. And what we want to do is say, listen, we feel like there's a problem out here. We feel like that this time in history is a little different in the past. We think there's going to be a supply and demand issue. We think there's going to be a high demand for pilots, a very low supply of pilots. And what we really want more than anything else is we just want the ability to do a study on that. We want to know, is this real or not? And we would like to have the GAO, someone sponsor a study to the GAO to say, listen, you guys go out and give us a very objective study on this. We'll put to the side any type of emotion, any type of feelings and stuff like that. Let's get that to the side and let's just look strictly at what's the facts tell us. Because that way, if we have a fact-driven, very objectionable, data-driven study, that'll allow us to go to our politicians and communicate with them and say, listen, you know, here's what we're thinking, here's the data to prove it. So we were very successful for that. We drew up the paper. We went to Congress, we presented it to the GAO, Dr. Dillingham, and to the Senate, or to the House Aviation Subcommittee. Both the Democrats and Republicans were there. We presented it to them, we showed them our issues and so forth. They were very receptive, and the good news was that after those meetings, it was shortly thereafter that a study was acted on. And a study was called for by the GAO. Dr. Dillingham and his group now are out there starting to do the research, do the analysis, pull the data from all the different groups that they can, and try, hopefully by the end of this year, the GAO will be able to deliver a product out there that's basically going to lay out, here's supply and demand in the aviation industry, here's where the chips fall. So we think that's really good news to try to get to the bottom of this, just try to say, hey, where exactly are we? I think the interesting thing about this, and this is kind of what Kent was talking about a while ago, as a stakeholder group, as we were working with the GAO trying to get this study going, the other piece of the puzzle was we did approach the University of North Dakota and Kent and his team, and we just asked, in the event, there's two scenarios here. One is if the GAO does not commission the study and off we go, as an industry, we still need to know what's going on. We still need to know, are there pilots available, are there not pilots available, what's the demand going to be, is it high or low, or so forth. In the event they don't give us the study, then at least we could have a private study done here by the university education system to say, hey guys, here's what you got. In the event the GAO did do the study, which they are, this data can be used to give to those guys. They're very forthcoming in all the studies. We're trying to push it to them to say, listen, a lot of the groundwork's been done. There's been a lot of facets here looked at, and what we wanted to do was be able to feed them information. So I'm pleased to announce that the study is launched. It's really good news for all of us, just because we're all going to hear from a government study done that the politicians will listen to. Whenever a politician wants to know what's going on, they will order up the GAO study and look at that. So we're really pleased that this is going to get done, and we're really pleased that they're already looking into some of the studies that are out there now. They're talking to the airlines. They're trying hard to pull this data in to deliver us a product by the end of this year. There's some other studies out there going on right now. I would like to say that I try to keep up with some of the other things going on. There's some differing opinion on exactly the effects of the supply and demand issue. I think the University of North Dakota has done a wonderful job on pulling together the study that they did in collaboration with the other schools, with AABI, with UAA. It is probably one of the most all-encompassing studies that I've seen. It looks at some really key factors that other studies are not looking at. One, for instance, is the international training. The amount of international training that's taking place in the U.S., where a U.S. certificate is issued with that pilot then going back overseas, that is 40 to 45%, if I believe. Correct. It's very astounding. So, that's really a key figure there for us to understand, because we can look at just data, raw data, and say, well, how many ATPs were produced? Well, that's another number you got to get your head around a little bit, because a lot of the ATPs that are produced today actually happens through the upgrade process at our airlines. That's a key element that's missed in a lot of places, as well as the international stuff. So the study that I'm seeing now through Kent and his team, it appears that a lot of these factors are taken into consideration, which is a must. We've got to get down to as granular as we can to get the most accurate data that's out there. Education, this is a piece that I think is really important, and here's where I kind of want to pull this together at. We've come a long way in the last 12 to 18 months. If I would have asked you 18 to 24 months ago, is there a pilot supply and demand issue? Is there a shortage? There really wasn't a lot of talk about it. There was a little bit of talk here and there, and I had a lot more people back then saying, nah, this will work itself out, guys, don't worry. We've heard this a dozen times in the past, you've always worked it out, don't worry about it. Today is a little different. Today I've listed up here several forums where we are finally at all these forums talking about this subject. We now are starting to see some good valid data come out from some organizations that we think are very insightful, and that is something that we did not have 12 to 18 months ago. Today you sit there and you can talk to the majority of people, and they will look at you and say, yeah, I believe in this time. I see a supply issue, I see the demand issue. Yes, it's time to act upon this. And I think that's a big key difference today than where we were 18 months ago, which is pretty exciting for us. We're glad to be able to start pushing this forward, start moving it forward. Organizations like AABI, UAA at their conferences, the WASRATS conference a few weeks ago, INTAS that's put on by Embry-Riddle down at Daytona Beach, the RA convention today, and hopefully a future symposium in Washington, D.C. will be put up there pretty soon to talk about this exact issue and to educate people. A lot of people say, well, Darren, is anything really happening? And what I'd like to say is yes. The biggest thing that we're doing right now is educating everybody on the fact that this time is a little different than last, and yes, we do have a supply and demand issue, and now it's time to make that next step forward. Is once we educate ourselves, then we start educating our political leadership on Capitol Hill. If we're going to get anywhere, we have to be able to show them with sound data that here's the problem, here's what we're seeing. The next step after this now is to go start presenting solutions, and that's where we all come in and play a factor in this. Every one of us has to come up with solutions to this. And it's real easy to be able to point to the government and say, well, we just want you guys to do this. If you do this, it'll all go away. But I will say that in our meetings with political leadership and the GAO and so forth, one of the main questions they ask for us is, hey, Darren, you want us to study this, you want us to give us the objective study, you want us to do the objective study for you, but the question's going to be, what are you willing to do? What kind of, as Scott would say, what kind of skin in the game do you guys have? And I think there's some really positive things that you've heard today on that. You've heard about the Gateway program. You talk about pathway programs. These are steps that carriers are starting to take and starting to look at to create opportunity for new students. You saw data from Kent today that said one of the big drivers that students want to see is they want to see the pathway. They want to say, hey, if I'm going to sink this kind of funding into education, How do I get to a United Airlines? How do I get to Delta Airlines? How do I get to American Airlines? How do I get to a JetBlue? They have to see that. So I think those are good positive steps we're starting to see right now. And that's going to be a good solution that we can take to the government and say, here's what we're doing, among some other things. So, what can the government do? That's something that we're all going to have to think about. Is there, it's easy for us to say change the law, that's going to make, maybe not. I think, one of the things that I like to propose out there every once in a while is a regulatory change. I think there's some regulatory changes that we can make within the FAA on how do we train a pilot. We're so used to the 40, 50, 60-year-old model of private, instrument, commercial, multi, and then off you go. Is that really the only way we can do this? I mean, our folks over in Europe and Asia are able to put together good, true ab initio programs that are very successful. And I think it's time that we really take a close look at programs like that. So, with that said, I always like to leave with this. This guy's got a long hike to go here. The pilot supply-demand issue, we just started on this 12 to 18 months ago. We've made a lot of progress, a lot of things have happened. I also like to say that I think we got a long way to go. I think this is a long marathon, and I think we take 1 year at a time, 1 day at a time, and we start coming up with solutions, both short-term and long-term, and we start on that today, knowing that every day we're going to keep working, and this is a 20-year problem. Remember, the A4A data shows that the retirements and so forth is only going to get worse year over year for the next 20 years. So this is not something we're going to solve today. This is not something we're going to solve tomorrow. But the most critical thing we can do is start today on doing something. Because if we don't, the deeper we get into this and not do anything and not be proactive in this situation, the harder it is going to be to climb those steps someday. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. We're going to start taking questions from the audience here, but I'm going to, while anybody wants to walk up to a mic, moves in that direction, I'm going to start out. Excellent presentations, 3 different perspectives, and I can see that you're all being very proactive in your own way and representing your organizations and companies to try to improve your vision. That was one of the issues that RA's Operations Council and our CEOs identified about 18 months ago is the question was, are we going to have a shortage, and what can we do about it as well? And one of the trends that I've heard from the panel is that the change in perspectives. When I was starting my career, I mean, people like me would walk on hot coals to get an interview, let alone a job as well. It's very competitive. And obviously we're seeing a change in that perspective as well. So my question for the group here is based on that really change, what's being done that's effective, and what do you see that the industry as a whole, and including the stakeholders, not just the airlines, but other folks involved, training schools, Paul, training schools and suppliers, what can they do as well to really try to reverse this trend and address some of the issues that the 3 of you have identified today? Who would like to take that first?
Well, I think one of the things that we're trying to do at ExpressJet is to realize that a young person wants to see a path. They want to see a path through education. They want to see a path on how to bridge that gap between graduation and the 1,500 hours now, and then they want to see opportunity for them at the regional level and at the major level. So one of the things that we're working on is to create that for them, to show them that here's a pathway to do it. And we have certain guarantees along that path for them, but it's based on performance. They've got to perform for us. We do expect someone, like Kent was talking about earlier, professionalism. That's a huge deal. We are looking for a good, solid professional pilot, one that's keeping their nose clean, that's out there working hard, trying to be the best, most safe possible pilot they can be. And if that person is doing those type of activities, working hard, then we are able to offer them opportunity at our level, and then also to hopefully offer them opportunity at the major level. So,
good points.
I would agree with that, and just add on to the fact that to help a student be successful in each of those pieces, I think mentorship and guidance is a big part of that, not just at the university level through professors, but people in industry and pilots coming back to campus and talking with students about what it means to be professional in this industry and how to help them be successful and achieve those each and every step and be successful in that.
That really seems to be one of the keys to the success of the Gateway program. I mean, Cape Air was really a pathfinder here to identify that structured pathway that Ken identified as being so important to your students.
Yeah. It's as I said earlier, students really, they want a structured environment. They're used to that. And the Gateway program or programs like it, the Pathway, provide that. I think one thing that we need to do is on this subject is really try to find out particulars of what are the lifestyle issues that was so highly of a concern to young people. Specifically, what are they? And both education and industry needs to work on that, because what may be part of the solution there from an industry standpoint is something different, the way you run your schedule or where you base your pilots or something along those lines, in order to keep them more motivated or interested in the career. I know from my own children, my son coined the phrase, and I said I would use it. They become, in my opinion, codependent on each other and their social networks. So if you can do things to keep them closer to their social network as opposed to away from their social network, I think they're going to be more interested in staying with a company or seeking that company out, because that seems to be a high priority, much more so than when you and I were there.
Yeah. You know. Very good. It's a very important point to make. Paul, I think I saw you, Paul Prydecker, who's with Air Wisconsin. He's also the chairman of RA's Flight Training Committee. Paul?
Thanks, Scott. When you said come on up and ask a question, that's what I did, so I was just paying attention to you. My question's for Krista, and first, congratulations on your program. It's nice to see all that success. I think I heard you say it was 5 years that it's been going?
Yep, and we're in our 6th year, yeah.
Is it safe to assume that not everybody is successful getting through the program?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good.
We've
and can you comment on the detractors from success, whether they're skill sets or attitude or anything like that?
Right. We've seen some attrition, both voluntary and involuntary, students at different progressions. And there's really no penalty if somebody at some point along the way decides this isn't the right path for me. And we try to certainly help guide them to that decision, or help, through the mentorship process, figure out what their questions and concerns are. But with regards to involuntary attrition, we see that in whether it's a training deficiency, somebody that isn't able to progress through our training program, or each gate is just that, a gate. They have to be successful in getting hired by the university as a flight instructor. They need to be successful in our training program at Cape Air through the internship process and through after flight instruction. So each of those pieces is important, and we try very hard to help guide and mentor that person through that process. But if they aren't successful, these are necessary gates. They have to perform, as Darren said, to a certain level that we expect them to perform at. And if they can't, they're not going to be successful through the entirety of the program. So we certainly hold them to that standard, and they're aware of what standards they're being held to and how they need to perform to achieve that. Good question, though.
Good question. Yeah, very good. Gary.
Question to all the panel, if you'd like to respond. Obviously, as Darren says, the scenario may be a little bit different this time than what we've experienced in the past. Would you agree, not agree, or express opinions on, well, let me just say that in the past, as an industry, we've more dealt with the short term, and we've reacted to the shortages that we've had, and not thought so much about the long term of this. Would you agree that maybe this time, since it might be different, that we need to look at solutions both short term, medium term, and long term for the industry?
That's a great question.
Who wants to go? Yeah.
Gary, I think you're exactly right. I think there is short term, medium term, long term goals here. There's no question, and I think from what I'm seeing on the data, and the retirements that's coming in front of us, and other regulatory change that'll be out there on the horizons, I think we have to be very aggressive on looking at long-term solutions. We've got to start looking 3, 4, and 5 years down the road, realizing the fact that, absolutely, a guy's going to retire. We know it's going to happen. We know that, unless there is some, catastrophic economic problem here, we'll assume that things will go nicely for us. We have to be prepared to backfill that, and I think we must start long-term programs today, which is kind of difficult. That's kind of when you go forward today and say, listen, I'm going to start investing in something that's 3-4 years down the road before you see any return on investment, that's a difficult case to make. So that's why it's really critical to get everybody in our leadership, our executive leadership and our political leadership to say, hey, listen, this problem is starting today. Everyone says, is there a pilot shortage today? I would ask the audience, what do y'all think? Do you think there's a shortage, yes or no, today? I will say yes, without a doubt, it's today. And I say that only because I know that my counterparts at other airlines, there's already a hard time finding 1,500-hour pilots and filling classes. That's already becoming a challenge. So, if it's becoming a challenge now, and if it's starting to become a challenge for our simulator vendors out there who sell sim time, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, we're not selling as much just because they can't find the pilots, I would suggest the shortage started. It's here now today. It's only going to get worse because we truly haven't seen attrition yet. But I think it's really critical that we start looking long-term and investing in long-term 3, 4, 5 years down the road through different pathway programs, funding programs, and so forth. Absolutely.
Just a comment there is, most of the solutions that we've talked about here today are more long-term focused, or at least mid-term focused. And I don't have a lot of solutions to give you on the short term, other than they probably will be expensive, because I don't see another way to quickly fill the ranks. And so that's something the industry may have to come to grips with. I think whatever happens, there's going to be additional cost, but there definitely has to be some long-term solutions, because it's just going to get worse. And so the sooner those long-term or medium-term solutions are put in place, the better we'll all be.
So you can really see a connectivity among stakeholders. It's not just the regional airlines alone. It's the universities.
Sure.
It's the training academies, the training schools. Mentioned the sim time issue, and probably everybody in this room right now. What I found really interesting, and one of the questions I've been asked, is this different? The concerns that have been expressed, particularly by the operations community and the university, is concerned about current trends, having trouble getting pilots now. And then, of course, we see the significant spike in major airline retirements, 3 or 4 years down the road from now. And the question is this different? It's almost like they're asking, isn't this Chicken Little? So I think we need to emphasize, what are you seeing that is different for the group here? What are you seeing that's different now that possibly indicates that not only are we going to continue to see stress in the supply in the next 2-3 years, but that might lead to more problems down the road?
Right. And I'll take that one. Thank you. I've seen the changes that have occurred steadily over the last decade to decade and a half, and those changes are in young people's perceptions of their career aspirations. I teach upper division flight courses, and I always ask my students the first day of class, where do you want to go, where are you heading, and I'm just attempting to get to know them. And if I were to turn the clock back 10, 15 years, 75, 80, 90% of those students would say, I want to fly for an airline, and they actually identified what airline they wanted to fly for and what equipment they wanted to be on. And that's changed dramatically. I can tell you that the enrollments at the University of North Dakota, first of all, we had a huge influx of students last fall, or this past fall, 422 additional new students, with an increase in students that are interested in professional flight. But over the years, right now we have 1,330 undergraduate students in aviation. 53% of those students are in a professional flight major or track. And how that compares is it used to be 75 to 80% of the student population used to have that career interest. So not only is the career interest in airline pilot flying or airline careers changing, it's changing from just a standpoint of those wanting to fly professionally.
Good points. Good points. Okay, we have time for maybe one more question from the audience if we have one. Ariana?
This question is for Kent. I think it was your follow-on study that looked at what would need to change in the industry to keep people engaged in the professional pilot career. And I think it's really interesting that prestige is ranked so low. And I know that's a big concern in a lot of the airlines that I've talked to, is increasing the prestige of the career and sort of promoting professionalism through that route. And I'm wondering what the disconnect is between the students rating that low and that being a big concern for the airlines.
It's a good question. We looked at, when we were trying to set up the forecast, as we've done with other prior forecasts, we couldn't find a tangible metric to determine that that's one of the variables in convincing somebody to be, quote, an airline pilot. And this is the first time we have any kind of data based on that small survey. So it doesn't seem to be as big of a factor. We couldn't find any way to measure it and find any correlation between it and making a career choice. I think that if we promote the profession and perhaps raise the prestige or the esteem of it, young people may flock to it because it's held, you know, with a higher, I guess, you know, interest. So.
Yeah, and actually that was my next question: is do you think it's a do you think it's a general generational issue, or do you think it's the people who are being attracted to the career in the first place, and that's what's causing?
Say that again.
So my next question was basically, do you think it's a general generational issue with just the age of people who are in college right now, or is it the people who are being attracted to the pilot career because the perceived prestige has dropped off? That's now a lower priority for them.
I don't know if, my opinion is, and I don't have necessarily data to back it up other than that most recent survey, I think the biggest issue with people not pursuing, young people wanting to pursue an airline career or even a professional pilot career, obviously cost is an issue. I mean, it's just become perhaps long-term unsustainable. But really, it's the lifestyle issues. I think the priorities, friends, family, their social networks more important. They don't want to be away from that. They don't want to disconnect from that. And the lifestyle of a pilot can interfere with that connection. And I think that's a bigger driver right now, that and the cost, than certainly a prestige issue.
Good questions. Well, just to summarize, 3 fantastic presentations, a good dialogue here as well. Obviously, all 3 of you have been very involved, very proactive addressing this issue in your own way, both for Cape Air and from the university, from UND, and Darren, not only for ExpressJet, but being a leader in the field and kind of bringing together stakeholders to bring more attention to this on a policy level, have been most effective as well. But the message I'm hearing, and I think what the message that everybody here will be taking away is you've been proactive and they've been proactive in their own way. We all need to be very much aware of all these efforts. We need to get on board and help try to do things proactively now to assure a very robust supply of safe and professional pilots in the future. So I commend you all for your work and actually issue an invitation to everybody, because we're all stakeholders in this particular issue, to really step up not only for your own organizations, but for the whole community at large, because a rising tide really does float all boats. And it's in everybody's interest here really to make sure that tide continues to rise. So I want to thank you for joining us today, and please join me in thanking our panelists.